Yeah, maybe. How about how long?
Sasha, you want an intro?
Yeah. Gonna hold up some ladies.
And you can just tell it? Yeah. Oh, sweet. Yeah. Are we live right now? Hello, everybody's. Oh, and the microphones are on. The crowd is still settling in. I'm not starting yet. I'm just starting now for the live stream. The crowd is still settling in. We've got gross stories by the fire tonight. Nick, come here. We're just doing the intro for the live stream. Good. Nick is out passing out his gummy worms.
Is the live stream actually streaming?
It's actually streaming live right now.
I mean,
No, that's okay. You can swear on my YouTube channel. I don't care.
oh my God! Wow, look at this.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I almost look presentable.
Ladies and gentlemen at home watching, this is Nicholas Kaufmann, our author. Tonight, you want to show that we've got a copy of your book right there. That is the Mind Worms. We're going to be talking about Nick's process creating this book.
I feel so special being on a live stream.
You are special. That's right. This is
We're
our.
also dressed very well.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I feel like we could be maybe having cocktails.
We could actually have like a YouTube show where we just dress well and talk about costumes.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like right. I love that. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Yay.
I don't know if they have a specialty drink today, but someone was asking. But I thought it would be funny if we put some gummy worms into scotch or something.
These fry the special thing to make the special drink. Yeah, I think the more goes
It would have to be tequila, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Anyway, so we're still waiting for the crowd to get settled.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks
Stick
for
around.
tuning in. Stick around. We'll probably get going in about 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes.
Go get yourself a beverage. Use the restroom.
Yes, we're here at the Barrows and Tents tasting room. So get yourself a tasty cocktail because you're not going to want to miss this.
Not a minute.
Not a minute. I can see the crowd's already got
All right, I'm just going to finish
Yeah,
setting
go do
up.
your thing. I'm
Stick
sorry.
around. We've got a great show. Foo Fighters are here.
Dave Grohl, Taylor Swift, and Sting. Which I actually just got tickets to Sting City Center. They're doing a dance performance.
Oh, wow.
To 25 of Sting's songs. I just got tickets. I'm so excited.
I saw him do Mac the Knife before it took it to Broadway.
Oh, you did? Where did you see that?
I saw it in
Wait,
Washington.
Teal, come sit down and let's have a conversation because there are people probably watching from home. So, ladies and gentlemen watching at home, this is Teal.
Hello. Yeah, I saw him in the 80s in Washington, D.C. before they brought it up to Broadway. He was Mac the Knife in the music.
Three Penny Opera.
Yeah, Three Penny Opera.
Yeah. I totally saw that on Broadway.
Well, this was the tryouts for it, where they were kind of getting their legs together. And he wasn't quite there yet. I mean, because he was the star. You know that people had come into it later, and so everybody else was like here, and he was here, and you could see during the show it kind of there. And I'm sure by the time he got the run done, he was up there.
Yeah.
But he was not a Broadway singer. Think about it. You know, it's a different kind of performing.
Yep.
So it was just interesting to see his style and the Broadway style, and they were trying to accommodate it. Ultimately, it worked, but I could see where that's why they were doing the tryout to get it ready for Broadway.
Hey, Carol, how you doing? So I think it's so much fun to see. I don't know if I should be talking about this. I love to see a show in previews for exactly that.
I had a friend who was the house manager for. I can't think of his name now. Magic on Broadway. No, it was the Canadian train. Keith. I can't think of his name. But Peter Rivera was the show. And so I think it was just called Magic. But it was, I saw it reincarnations of it during the run while they were working it out. And it really was. And the thing is, he was a stage magician, and they kind of built the show around him with a story and all. Merlin? He was Merlin.
I thought it was.
And he's supposed to play the young Merlin.
Yeah, but I
And they kind of built the show around him. And you could see them trying to work around the fact that he was not a Broadway performer. He was a magician.
Yeah,
That's what he did. He did really well. So they kept like adding a little bit more magic into it and giving a little bit more Cheetah Rivera.
have one. Thank you, Carol.
And then Cheetah
You
Rivera.
always want more. You always want Cheetah Rivera to
there
do
was
more.
great. There was a great number. They added by the third incarnation. They added a number with just her number. She was playing Morgan Le Fay, his unreal rival. And she comes out and she has this cloak. And she does this dance with the cloak, and then she drops it the first time, and then there's another cloak. And then she does it again, and eventually there's 5 cloaks dancing behind her. And the other performers were in the cloak. So she was her with a cloak, and the others were just cloaks. And they did this wonderful production number. Yeah, it was Merlin. It was called Merlin. That's why I couldn't.
So while we're sitting here waiting for the gross stories to get started, you yourself are quite not only an actor but a very terrific. I can't say. Sometimes I get.
White's is high.
You have written many books, many short stories. You've been in many anthologies. Do you want to tell about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a former actor, stuntman. Killed many people in movies. Actually, I was the star of a movie where the first time a woman was tied to the buzzsaw and not saved in the history of cinema. And you go on the movie tapes back in the 80s. But I'm a novelist, and I've got 30 books out. I've got a book coming out later this year, which I'm incredibly proud of, called Not Born a Woman, from Crossroad Press. And I have a short story that just came out this month in the Sherlock Holmes Mystery Magazine.
So if it's not born a woman, what is it?
It's of course the quote from the Scottish play: "He who is not born of woman, him should I fear or none." And it is about a character who is literally created from death, and how he has to deal with humanity. In the 1930s, he's a private eye in the 1930s. So I'm hoping that's going to splash big when it comes out. And I've got a bunch of short stories out, horror stories.
Amazing. Now we're going to be asking for gross stories.
I've got one.
You have one. Excellent. Okay. Do you think, Nick? What do you think? Should we give it a few more? What do you
2
want?
more minutes. Let's wait. I know that there's.
Oh, yeah. We'll wait. We can wait more. We can do fun.
They have the parole officer has to check them before they can come to see me.
That's right.
Consorting with known authors is a crime in and of itself.
Oh, sorry.
I saw you just had a premiere of a film.
I did.
Yeah.
Of Side Effects May Vary, which is actually it's a movie by J.R. Bookwalter, which he made a ton of like infamous like underground movies back in the 90s, back in the heyday of Blockbuster. And yeah, he's touring the country right now with Side Effects May Vary. I play the doctor. Love playing a good doctor.
No, you're not a Time Lord doctor. You're just the doctor.
I'm just the doctor.
Okay.
Injecting people left and right with something that may or may not be nefarious. Yeah.
You mean it could give you mind worms?
I am so excited to find out just exactly what those mind worms are up to. Do you have any idea?
Having read his previous 2 in the series, which
Yes.
are phenomenal, by the way,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be gross and horrifying.
That is incredible. Have you ever had a mind worm stuck in your head?
I've had many an earwig stuck in my mind, but no mind worms.
What's the difference between an earwig and a mind worm?
One is a Night Gallery episode, but it's the song that you can't get out of your head.
Ah.
The song that no matter. I actually read a wonderful short story years ago where they find a guy who's a musician, and they find him in his room and he's staring blankly ahead and mumbling. And the two cops who come in trying to figure out how it got this way. And the one cop reads music, the other doesn't. And he sees this thing he scribbled in front of him. So the one cop picks it up, I don't know, he hands it to the guy who reads music and goes, and it turns out it's the perfect commercial jingle. It fills up your mind to the point where you can't think of anything else.
Yeah. I literally always have a song running through the background.
Yep.
How many of you guys? I do.
All the time.
Yeah.
On the way over,
Oh.
yeah, couldn't help it.
It's
Constant.
you know, I feel like my whole life has been scored by B movies. So they're always running in the
So
background.
you've got John Carpenter synthesizer
Yeah, I mean,
in the background.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, well, the rule number one, everything is a song.
Right,
No matter
right.
what it is, there's some song that will connect to it. Although sometimes with friends of mine, when I get together, it becomes a battle to see who can remember the most Saturday morning cartoon jingles.
I love that. Oh, there was nothing better than Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, it's been lost because it was you looked forward to it. Now it's sort of anytime, anywhere.
It's not special.
But it was you get up ridiculously early before your parents, get your cereal, and you sit there and you watch Colonel Bleep, and then on through the day. And by noon, it went to adult programs and didn't care anymore.
And then, like 4 or 5 years later, when you were like 10 or 11, it became like Dynasty, Love Boat, and Dallas. And you literally, right, like all week long, you were like waiting for your Friday night and Fantasy Island. I miss loving shows like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank God for Nostalgia Channels and streaming.
Yes.
Because, I'm catching up on a lot of 50s TV shows that I missed. I love the half-hour TV format, so I watch a lot of old stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, on Tubi, I catch a lot of movies that some people remember.
Are you pointing in my direction?
Would I do such a thing?
We're just chit-chatting for the live stream. Our event hasn't officially begun yet, just so everybody knows exactly what's going on here. We're gonna probably get started in about 5 minutes, but we're live streaming. We didn't know we were gonna live stream, but it happened. So.
But your question is, can a zombie live stream?
We just got a thumbs up. I'm just new to all of this. We got zombies. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay.
I'll be gone because I think there's a mind worm coming this way.
All right, let me intro you before I bring you in. Let's do this the right way. I'm so excited. All right, cool. We're officially beginning, and the sound is fine. All right, and you guys can all hear me, okay?
Yes.
Not so great. Just maybe a little bit higher. I can go a little bit closer. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gross Stories by the Fire, an author event starring the phenomenal Nicholas Kaufmann. Yay! Thank you so much, Nicholas. Come, take a seat next to me.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank Teal for entertaining the crowd and all of you at home.
He's our audience fluffer. Are you feeling fluffed? I hope you're feeling
I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, if you aren't feeling fluffed now, you will by the time this event is over.
Oh my God, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of fluffing.
So, Nick, I'm so excited because normally, right, the ghost stories is like people come up and bring their spooky stories, and we love that. But Nick and the theme of his book, Mind Worms, brings something different.
Gross stories.
Gross.
So my original thought was that people could just share like the grossest medical stories of their lives, but then I thought that's kind of intrusive. So it doesn't have to be medical.
It doesn't have to be medical, although we've all been there, right? We understand. My husband, he's not going to share tonight, he has a really gnarly story about a broken toenail, right? It's like little like gross things, or like, I mean, I know one of the grossest things that ever happened to me. I was like all like Shining Danny style in my basement in the bare feet on my tricycle, and sure enough, stepped on a rusty nail.
No! Oh my God.
It was gross.
I thought you were going to say, sure enough, these twin girl ghosts showed up.
The elevator. Seriously, the elevator of blood opened up. Oh wait, do you have a gross story?
I have a gross story.
I knew it.
It's not. It is medical, but it's not that gross. But it's funny, but also a little gross. So when I turned 50, every 50-year-old has to do this. You get a colonoscopy. We're all adults here. I could say colonoscopy and no one will giggle. Except me, I'll giggle a little bit. So you know how terrible, those of you who have had a colonoscopy know how terrible the prep is for this. You have to drink this terrible medicinal liquid and it cleans you out in the most violent way possible. The word fire hose comes to mind. But then, I did the thing. I went to get my colonoscopy. And for reasons I won't go into, they were not able to complete the entire colonoscopy in that one visit. Something went wrong. So I had to come back 6 months later, which meant doing the prep again 6 months later. But I did it. I got through it. I went back for my colonoscopy. And those of you who know me well know that when I'm nervous, the way that I try to connect with people is to make them laugh. So I got there and I'm talking to everyone at the medical center about how great the drugs were for the original colonoscopy. And I just love the drugs. And oh my God, those drugs are so great, aren't they? And every time I do that to each person, I get this weird look from them. So finally I go through the operation, the colonoscopy, and I wake up in the recovery room, which the colonoscopy, the doctor had come up with a name for the recovery room. He called it the fartatorium because there's so much air inside you after a colonoscopy. Anyway, so I wake up. I'm drugged, but I'm sort of with it. And the nurse is there saying, "How do you feel?" etc. And I said, "I feel great. Those drugs are really great." And she says, "You have to stop saying that. They think you're going to raid the drugstore, the pharmacy." So I learned my lesson, which is if you enjoy the drugs during the procedure, keep it to yourself. So it's not too gross a story.
But that's true. Like a lot of jokes that would be funny for your friends do not go over well with doctors.
Yes.
At all.
Or security people.
Or security people. Exactly. So does anybody in the audience
have a gross story they'd like to share?
Really fun gross story?
Of course Teal does, right?
Teal, you stay here. Teal, come on up, take my seat. Ladies and gentlemen watching at home, this is Teal.
Welcome, Teal.
Hello, how are you?
Are you ready to gross us all out?
I hope.
I hope you're all happy that you came to hear these disgusting stories.
All right. So, this is an ENT friend of mine. And as you all know, ENTs usually deal with the most wonderful part of human experience, disaster. So he was on a truck. They got a call. It was a pickup truck on a highway that had rear-ended really hard into a semi. It's pitch dark. It's like 10 or 11 at night. It's cloudy, so there's no light at all. And the pickup truck is pancaked into it so that the front of it is crushed in and they can't get to the doors to get into the pickup cab. The only way in is through the little window in the back of the pickup. But none of the firefighters are small enough to get through it. And my buddy, who's EMT, was not. But he had an intern riding along. Intern was a college girl who was relatively small. So as soon as they realized the only way to get in was through the window, all eyes go to her, and she's like, okay. So they break out the window so she can get through. It is absolutely pitch dark. She squeezes the upper half of her body through, puts her hand in, and her hand goes down into something warm and squishy and textured, and she starts to scream. So she's screaming hysterically halfway into the cab. They can't see what's going on. they can't yank her out because if they yank her out, they could hurt her because they got most of the glass out. So they're like, you have to keep going. You have to get in so we can get some light in there to you. And she's screaming and screaming. She eventually crawls in, gets in, still screaming her brains out. They shine the light in, and it's a giant pan of lasagna. She is, however, still screaming her brains out. And the driver is unconscious and bleeding in the driver's seat, having whacked his head on the steering wheel. But they can't get her calmed down enough to treat him for like 10 minutes because she's just completely lost it.
Once you start, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the whole kind of deal.
Oh no, I meant eating lasagna.
Well, there's that brains. So they eventually get her calmed down, and they talk her through treating the guy. And ultimately, he had like a bad concussion and some stitches, and he was okay. But they literally couldn't. They had to end up towing the pickup truck out so they could use the jaws of death to get him out the door. But they had to take her to the hospital. And she had to spend the night in the hospital because she was so completely freaked out by the experience. But to her credit, she came on for her next shift. And she actually kept going, which is just amazing.
And the lasagna? Was the lasagna okay?
It was a little bit warm. And possibly chewy in a way we're not happy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been sausage. So,
I already regret this decision.
the night's just beginning and it's all going off.
Thank you, Tio. That was a great story.
You're more than welcome.
Does anyone else have a gross story they'd like to share?
I could show you that X-ray, which you wanted to see so bad.
No props. No props.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna sweeten the deal with a drink ticket for the Barrows Intense tasting room. And it can be like a gross, funny, weird, odd, I see a hand up. Carol's getting herself a free drink. Wow, she's going to work for this drink, but she's getting herself. Carol,
Come on up, Carol. Carol Geisinger. Hello. Please make me sick.
That's a really hard act to follow. I don't know how I can come up after T.O. Glenn and tell any kind of story. But back in the 70s, my mom was overall, she was a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I want to say that at the beginning. But when she'd had her first mastectomy, she had gone to the specialty ladies lingerie store where she wanted to get the right kind of undergarments that would work with the prosthesis that they gave her. And the person there at the store explained to her that, oh, really, it's not that big of a deal. You know, one side's bigger than the other. It's just going to like merge and it'll like even out and take care of itself. And my mother said, that is not how this works, you know. So the poor woman, she had a prosthesis that it was basically a big sack of liquid that she had to insert into her bra every morning in order to look balanced. And that's what they did in the 70s. That's what was available. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So she was an avid gardener, and her neighbor was also, and her neighbor had a big garden plot in the backyard. And my mother used to go over and help her and this, that, and the other. And, you know, when you're gardening, a lot of the time you bend over and you dig for stuff. And my mother was waiting for me at the door when I came home from school that day. And she's like, I need your help. I need your help. It's like, what? What's wrong? She goes, I lost it. Lost what? Well, the prosthesis had apparently fallen out of her shirt.
Oh my
and
God.
she was so worried that her friend was going to find it because she didn't want to tell her this.
Yeah.
We had to sneak over into the woman's backyard and root around in the rows of plants that they had planted, digging around in the dirt because it apparently had fallen out and gotten buried. Eventually, we rooted around until I found this white sack of something that looked like an eyeball staring up at me.
Oh
out
my
of the
God.
ground. Yep. But that's what it was, and so we carefully tucked it under an arm, went home, washed it off, and she was fine from there.
And thus, Boob Hunt was born.
Boob hunt. quite as gross as Teal's. No lasagna.
No, but at least it had a happy ending.
Yes.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you is a strong word. Maybe it's just like,
I made a mistake. Thank you.
that one wasn't too gross. No.
So Carol, the bartender knows you've got a drink coming. You don't even need a ticket. She's just waiting for your order. I know someone else has something they want to share.
I've got another horror movie story.
Oh, my friend Dave has
all
one.
right.
Dave's got a story.
Come on up.
David Wellington, horror writer, science fiction writer, esteemed podcaster.
Named after beef.
The beef is named after him.
Surprisingly, I've never heard that joke. So,
Look how good they
That's
look.
for sarcasm.
so I'm a writer, but I have a couple of true stories. Which one would you rather hear?
All right.
A story about cats and the things the cats do.
Nice,
No one's
always.
watching them.
Oh.
It's gross. Or the story about when I had to clean up the rice off the stairs. It's really gross.
So just
Okay.
so you know, we co-host a podcast called Spooky Science Lab, and this is pretty much how every episode starts. Like, what do you want to hear? Do you want this one or this one? So rice.
All right, so the rice story.
Even though I love
this-
kitties.
This happened when I was in college, and I was sharing an apartment with my girlfriend at the time, Amanda. And we were young kids. We were, not terribly responsible. And so there was a bag of garbage that we had in the kitchen that we didn't take out for like a week. And we kept trying to remind each other, oh, you should take out the bag of garbage. And I would say, you could take out the bag of garbage. And then she would say, right, so when are you taking out the bag of garbage? And eventually what happened was one night we were going out to a bar and we, with some friends, and we took the bag of garbage out of the can and put it at the top of the stairs so that we would remember to take it with us when we went out to go drinking. So we get ready to go out drinking, and we're all, running behind schedule, and one thing led to another. We forgot the bag of garbage. So it's sitting there at the top of the stairs, and our apartment was on the second floor, and it's just a straight flight of stairs, no down. We go out drinking, we had a great time with our friends. We come back, and I notice that there appears to be rice scattered all over the stairs. And Amanda, says, well, how are you going to clean that up? Because it had been my job to take the bag of garbage out, and I had forgotten. So I said, all right, I'll do it. So I got a dustpan and a little broom. And I was very drunk at this point. That'll explain some of this. So I start brushing the rice into the dustpan. And it's going okay, except the rice is very soft and kind of mushy. And I'm like, I'm destroying more, I'm grinding more of this rice into the carpet than I was actually getting in the dustpan. And I'm thinking, how am I going to handle this? And then I noticed something really unfortunate, which is that some of the grains of rice had actually crawled out of the dustpan and are trying to get away. Mind you, I was very drunk. I don't know if I could have done this if I hadn't been. I noticed that the trash bag had broken open at the bottom, not at the top, at the bottom, and grains of rice were crawling out of the trash bag and down the stairs. So
Except they weren't grains of rice.
I spent what felt like hours picking up one by one these little squirmy maggots and putting them in the dustpan, and then every time they would try to crawl out, I would shove them back in. And eventually I got all of them, or so I thought, and I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and there was a cloud of flies in the stairwell.
Oh my gosh.
It took forever to get them out of there. Flies, of course, can't find their way out of it. But yeah, and at the time I was drunk enough that it didn't bother me too much, but after the fact, I think, yes, my skin crawled.
Yeah, you're like, oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Dave. That's a gross story.
More than welcome.
Speaking of maggots, I don't know if you noticed, but I brought gummy worms for everyone to enjoy. So please, bon appetit after that story.
Even better now.
Even better now. Someone else, I know someone else has something gnarly they want to share. I will sweeten the deal with a tarot vintage. This is the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I wrote the guidebook that's inside. Is anybody willing to come
share.
back and tell a second story to you?
Oh wait, no, we've got someone back here.
Oh wait,
We've got.
who is this in the
This
Irish
is-
hat?
Her name is Corey Eckert. I went to college with her,
Oh,
so she knows all the stories.
I want to hear a gross story about
Fresh
it.
blood. I mean, great.
It's a gross Nick story. Yes.
Oh god,
Sorry, yes.
they're all gross.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
Tori
Tori Eckert.
And this is for you. Actually, the guy.
Hi Corey, thank you for taking part.
Thank you. The name is Eckert Chu.
Oh.
I'm sure that's
Yes,
said.
my apologies.
So, those of you who have had birthed children will understand it is a deeply, deeply disgusting thing to do. It is gross in ways that they do not tell you in what to expect. They do not tell you that in all the like happy childbirth. Here's how you push classes. So, my story. I ended up having to have a C-section, and I had. It's not so much gross as funny to me, but I had an all-female surgical team. So I'm awake. You know, they've given me the pain block. I can't feel anything, which is great. And I'm sitting there, and as far as I can tell, I'm open to the sky. And my surgical team starts discussing Kill Bill, which had just come out. And these are all women. One of them was like, well, I wasn't sure if I was going to see that, you know, would it be too bloody or whatever. And literally one of them said, well, I mean, it was kind of a day at the office. I'm lying there going, what in God's name are they seeing? So that's my story. It went well. And my husband, Josh, who is with me and is over there, they're like, come see your new daughter. And he's like, okay. And he has literally seen me inside and out.
Oh,
That is our
thank
story.
you,
That took a lot of
Corey.
guts to tell.
Thank you for not telling any of our college stories.
Not in front of her husband.
Okay, I feel like some people are showing up. We're collecting gross stories
Instead of ghost
from
stories.
the audience
Gross
instead of
stories.
ghost stories. And I see someone with their hand
Oh
up.
yeah, okay, come on up.
Please come on up.
Amy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amy to the stage with the grossest story ever.
Why don't you strip it for us?
Amy Goldschlager.
All right. So this is my story of why it's not always a good idea to have a substitute gym teacher. So when I think it was third grade, it was gym. We had a substitute and it was raining, and they decided to have a kickball game when there were too many students in the class. Like, you can't really do a kickball game when there's like 10 or 15 people in the outfield. When there is no outfield, it is a small gym. So we're all like pretty much stacked up against each other. And I remember the names of all these people. There's a guy directly in front of me like this. His name was Paul. I don't remember his last name, but I'm not going to share it because that would be mean. And then,
McCartney. Paul McCartney.
This was Roslyn. The names like that didn't come up that much. Then the best athlete in the class, whose name was Roselle, I also remember this clearly, kicked a huge fly ball So Paul went to try and catch it because, if you catch it, then the person's out. What he caught was my nose.
No.
Right there, bent aside,
Oh my God.
blood everywhere. My friend Debbie took me to the nurse, went to the hospital. They were sure it was broken. And of course, I'm like 10 years old and they're telling me this horror story about how if it is broken, they're going to have to physically put it into place.
Yes.
So I'm terrified. And then we're waiting, and then the radiologist comes back and says, it snapped back into place. We looked it over a zillion times, and there's no break. And then my mom took me out for pizza afterwards and ice cream at Carvel, and I was like, all right, this isn't so bad. And my mom is like, no.
I thought you were going to get killed.
No. I mean, and the sort of coda to that was a few years ago, I face planted on Livingston Street, and I did break my nose, or at least I'm pretty sure I did. And I went to the ENT, and it's like, yeah, it's broken, but we can't do anything about it. So, I mean, I don't know. Modern nose fixing is maybe not what it used to be. That's my nose break story.
Oh, thank you, Amy. That was suitably gross. I took a creative writing class in college, and one of the stories was about somebody going to get a nose job. And what I learned from that story was that when you get a nose job, they have a little hammer and they have to break your nose in order to reset it. And that's stuck with me now, 30 odd years.
This is a rebuild, so yeah.
Yeah, they broke your whole face is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty
Keep the
much.
schnoz, that's
Well, thank you everyone for these really gross, disgusting stories.
That was, you guys, thank you. You guys delivered.
You did. You came through.
Cheers to you.
It's just part of the human condition. We all have disgusting stories in our lives.
Oh, yeah. I just would love to hear the story that everybody's not telling. I know. One that I would never share. That's what we wanted.
I think so. I think a lot of people cycled through their thoughts like, oh no, I'm not telling that one. I'm not telling that one.
No, not at all. Not at all. So let's get on to you and the reason that we are here tonight.
Oh, thank you.
What
Yeah.
do you think?
I'm very excited to talk to this crowd about the mind worms.
Hold up the book.
And as he's holding up the book, I want to go ahead and give a proper introduction because he's a very accomplished author, and
Oh, thank you. Finally, someone recognizes.
and I want to pay heed to that. So let me just no, but where do you?
You said
Oh,
you're
there.
an accomplice, not an accomplice.
An accomplice. So, Nick Kaufmann is the critically acclaimed author of numerous works of horror and suspense, including a Graham Stoker Award-nominated General Slocum's Goal, the Thriller Award-nominated and Shirley Jackson Award-nominated Chasing the Dragon, the best-selling Dragon Award-nominated 100 Fathoms Below, co-written by Stephen Peck, and the best-selling Hungry Earth, which I believe is the Hungry Earth part of this series?
Yes, The Hungry Earth is the first book in the series, to which The Mind Worms is the third.
Excellent. All right, so more on that in a minute.
I've got all of them for sale here too in back.
Amazing. And Nick will be signing after
Yes.
the event as well, and
I
posing
bought fresh Sharpies.
fresh Sharpies. And you'll be posing for Instagram photos
Sure,
and fan
yes,
pics.
yes.
Awesome. In addition to his own original work, he has written for properties such as Zombies vs. Robots, The Rocketeer, and Warhammer. His short fiction has appeared in Cemetery Dance, Black Static, Nightmare Magazine, Interzone, Cosmic Horror, Monthly. Oh, I want to be like buried in these magazines. Oh, it's so great. And others. His nonfiction has appeared in On Writing Horrors by Writer's Digest Books, Dark Scribe Magazine. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's written for Rue Morgue.
I'm very old.
And others, right? That is one of the beautiful things that comes along with growing old, right? Your bio gets bigger. But we're here to celebrate your latest, which is The Mind Worm.
The Mind Worms, the third in the Dr. Laura Powell series of science horror thrillers, which is a genre I just made up.
We like that. So, or do we want to go back to the very first book
Sure.
in the series? So can you explain, is Dr. Laura Palmer the protagonist of all 3 novels?
Laura Powell, yeah.
Laura Powell, sorry.
I'd love to write
Laura
for.
Palmer.
Yeah, I'd love to write for Twin Peaks too. But yes, she's the main character of all 3 books. She is the medical examiner, the part-time medical examiner of a very small city in the Hudson Valley. There's not a lot of crime there. There's not a lot of people there, so she's the part-time medical examiner. But of course, in each novel, something happens where they need her to sort of autopsy a body. And that's usually the start of each novel, is her autopsying a body and discovering something strange about it, and the mystery that unfolds from there.
So what is can you give us a hint of what kind of the odd themes are of each of the novels, starting with the first one?
Yeah, okay, so in The Hungry Earth, it's a teenage, a dead body of a teenage girl that they think is a suicide, but her parents don't believe it's a suicide, so they have her autopsy. And Dr. Laura finds a strange substance inside the body that she can't identify. And so she has to get her estranged ex-boyfriend to help her identify it. And then, of course, together they, explore this mystery and
each other.
Yeah.
Yes. Love that.
Yeah, and in the second book, The Stone Serpent, she is tasked with autopsying a body from a car crash that just happened maybe 30 minutes ago, an hour ago, except the body is entirely fossilized, it's entirely petrified. So she doesn't understand how that could happen in such a quick time.
Yeah.
So that's the mystery in that one. And then in The Mind Worms, she's about to autopsy a body when it wakes up on the autopsy table. So then she has to figure out what happened. That she's actually the one who declared this person dead. There were no vital signs. It was clear this person was dead. And luckily, before she starts really cutting, he wakes up. And so she has to figure out what's going on there.
Oh my God, that's like one of those Victorian things where you're like buried alive, right? Accidentally,
Yeah.
and they put the bells next to the grave.
Yes, exactly. It's a classic fear. Edgar Allan Poe had that very fear. But I think it also goes. It comes through the ages to people now too, because burial is very different now from what it was back then. It used to just be, dig a hole, put the coffin in, fill it with dirt again. But now, coffins tend to be covered with a layer of cement. So if you do wake up in your coffin, you can't, just accept it. Just accept it.
Just count backwards.
Yeah, count down. count backwards from 99. Just like at the colonoscopy.
But no drugs. None of the good drugs. So Nick, do you have a medical background?
I do not. This is all just research.
Really?
It's all just fun research.
So where did you go? Where could people find you squirreling away, looking these things up? Did you interview actual doctors? Were you?
It's funny. My sister-in-law is a registered nurse, and her best friend is also a registered nurse, and I didn't talk to them about this. I should have. But I said to them, I hope I got all the medical stuff right. And they said I did, so that's good. Yeah, no, this was just research. I'm, as many writers are, I'm a bit of a loner at times, and so it's just me deep diving, following links online or books or what have you. And it's one of my most favorite things to do is to research a book.
I was just going to ask you that, because I know that's true for a lot of there's a lot of writers in the audience, show of hands writers in the audience who loves research. Yeah.
Oh yeah, see?
It's fun, right? Nick, do you have I sometimes feel like it's easy to go too far into the research.
Oh yeah.
To the point at which, so how do you know you need to pull it back and get back to the manuscript?
When I'm researching the color of internal organs, it's time to pull back. But researching is super fun, but you always find things you're not going to use.
Yeah.
Right? But they're super interesting. That's actually how our podcast started with me and David Wellington, the Spooky Science Lab podcast. We had so much extra research from the books that we wrote, really interesting, creepy, cool stuff, that we were like, we got to do something with it or we're going to explode. So we decided to just unload it all on the unsuspecting podcast listeners.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's so good.
2 episodes are up now. It's going to be every Monday.
And what's the name of the podcast?
Spooky Science Lab.
Spooky Science Lab, and it comes out every Monday.
Every Monday.
On
all platforms.
Excellent.
Every platform but YouTube for some reason.
That's amazing. It's easy enough to do it actually, but oh my gosh. So my mind just went totally blank.
Well, that's because you're thinking about the colors of internal organs. We all eventually think about that.
So actually, what I was thinking of was the gross. I have a gross story. I'm going to save the gross story for after. Okay. Maybe as a closing, I have something really gross that talking to a doctor reminded me of.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
You know what I was going to ask. So is it a fictional small town in the Hudson Valley?
It is, yes. I had to make up this town because in the first book, pretty much the whole town gets not eradicated per se, but there's a lot of bodies in that first one, and so I figured it's just safer to.
Did you completely make it up?
I did completely make it up, but I was like, you know, it's sort of south of Rhinebeck, but sort of east of Kingston. Like I just sort of like decided on an area and then stuck it in there. But I figured that was better than being like, you know, all of Beacon died or something.
Later, Hudson. It's supposed to be you. So can people pick up any book from the series?
Yes,
and understand
they stand alone very, very well. So if you wanted to get the third book first, it would be fine. All the information you need to know is very sort of contextualized and given to the reader. The only thing that really goes from one to the next are the interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. So like Laura and her boyfriend Booker get together again in the first book, and then they're still together in the second and third book. I think by the third book they're living together. Like so, the interpersonal relationships grow over the course of the series, but each book is a standalone story.
Amazing. And when you started, did you envision it as a series, or did it develop?
No, I did not. Settle in. This is a long but humorous story. In the summer, the summer of 2020, during lockdown had happened, I finished writing a novel called The Hungry Earth. Showed it to my agent. He said, I hate it. He was like, you can fire me if you want, but I hate this book. And I was like, I'm not going to fire you. This is what I need to hear, you know. So he gave me a book to read called Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, which is a great book about fungi and fungus and all that stuff. So I completely rewrote The Hungry Earth, completely. But I kept the title because I like the title. And I think I kept the first name Laura, and that was pretty much it. And this one, he was like, oh yeah, this is really good. But the end of The Hungry Earth originally was more of a downer. I think Booker died and Laura got the infection and spread it around the rest of the Hudson Valley or something. It was terrible. So in his notes to me, my agent drew us like a frowny face. So I said, why don't you give them a little bit more of a happy ending? I said, okay, I can do that. But I found a way to give them a happy ending, but also still have a spooky ending for the book itself. And then when I was coming up with the idea for The Stone Serpent, again, was going to be a completely different book. And he was like, no, do this instead. And I was like, I don't know how to get into this story. And he said, why not have Dr. Laura come back? And I was like, oh, a series. And so that really opened it up. Like, I think these are, nobody's a great judge of their own work, I think. But I think this series is my best work to date. And I'm really proud of them. And I'm really happy that I wrote a book that my agent thought was terrible. And he got me on a track to write something better.
That's amazing. So do you think there'll be a book 4, or is this it?
It's open to more. I could write Dr. Laura Powell novels until the sun dies. But
that'll be the 5th book.
It will actually be. It depends on how this one does. Like the first book did really well. The first book was an Amazon and Barnes & Noble bestseller twice over, actually. The Stone Serpent, though, was sort of a dip in sales. So if this one goes back up, we might, keep it going. But if this one continues a downward trend, it might be the last one.
Maybe it might be less.
Yeah.
Which one was the most kind of enjoyable for you personally? Is that Like asking which one is your favorite
That's
child?
tough. I know the middle one, the Stone Servant, was the most difficult to write. But the first one was fun. But I think the Mindworms maybe was the most fun because it's also the most gross. It's certainly the most gruesome of the three. And the readers so far have been telling me it's also the scariest of the three. So I think that's been working out well.
So do you fear for your own personal health and safety when you're writing body horror, sci-fi?
One thing I've learned from researching this kind of stuff is like there's a lot that can go wrong with the human body. A lot that can go wrong. It's a miracle that we can stand, walk, breathe, eat, anything. So yeah, I try not to think about that too much.
That's amazing. Well, would you give us a short reading from your book, and then I'd like to open the floor up to Q&A from the audience when we're done. Does that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm gonna read a small excerpt.
I'm going to take the stage.
Okay, so I told you this was gross, right? This excerpt is not particularly gross. I didn't want to turn anybody off. But there are, but I think it's a good excerpt to sort of give you a taste of what the book is like. So this excerpt is from the point of view of Jordan Mintz. Jordan was the one who was pronounced dead just a couple of days before this scene, but he woke up on Dr. Laura Powell's autopsy table, luckily, before the autopsy had actually begun. So there doesn't seem to be anything like wrong with him physically, but ever since then he's been having visions of worms, and he's suffering from an insatiable, overwhelming hunger, to the point that even people smell really good to him. So after he gets out of the hospital, he and his fiancée, Nadine, stay overnight at his sister Dahlia's house, and now this scene is the next morning. Jordan was groggy from lack of sleep when he left the guest room in the morning. He groaned as bright sunlight came through the open windows to accost his eyes. Making his way down the hall, he found Dahlia sitting in her wheelchair at the dinner table, wearing a Sakuma Athletic League t-shirt and sipping from a coffee mug that had the words, "Fresh out of fucks to give," printed on it. He sat down beside her. "Morning," he said. "Morning, how'd you sleep?" she asked. "Fine," he lied. He was getting a little too comfortable with lying, he thought, but he didn't want to burden Dahlia with the truth. He tossed and turned all night, disturbed by the overwhelming urge to bite Nadine while he slept beside him. No, not just bite him, to devour him. It had taken all his willpower not to roll over and sink his teeth into the meat of Nadine's shoulder and start chewing. "There's some more coffee in the pot in the kitchen," Dahlia said. "Where's Nadine? I didn't see him leave." "He went out earlier to get breakfast burritos for us," Jordan said. At least he didn't have to lie about that. Dahlia smiled. "That's nice of him. He didn't have to do that." Early that morning, before Dahlia was awake, Nadine had sneaked into the study and rumpled the sheets on the pull-out couch to make it look like he'd slept there last night. Jordan didn't care if his sister knew he'd spent the night with his fiancée, but Nadine insisted he didn't want to make Dahlia uncomfortable. When his mission was complete, Nadine had hurried back to the guest room, so excited about sneaking around like in Mom's house that he was instantly turned on again. He pushed Jordan back on the bed and went down on him, but Jordan only used his hands on Nadine in return, afraid of what might happen if he used his mouth. Dahlia put down her coffee mug, her expression turning serious. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, but I haven't figured out how exactly." "Oi, hold on," Jordan said. "This sounds like a conversation I'm going to need coffee for." He went into the kitchen and found a mug for himself in the cupboard. This one was adorned with the words, "Good morning, asshole." He had a vague memory of giving it to Dahlia as a birthday present some years back. He poured himself some coffee and returned to the table with it. "Now, what's going on?" he asked, taking a sip. It was hot enough to scald his tongue. She was trying very hard not to cry, but it didn't work. Tears rolled down her cheeks, even from beneath the patch over her right eye. He never knew you could still cry if you lost your eye. He wanted to reach across the table to take her hand, but he was afraid to touch her. He could smell her from where he sat. Not the scent of her shampoo or her natural body odor. He could smell her meat. He stared at his mug, purposely avoiding looking at her. "What is it, doll?" She wiped her tears away. "When you died, it felt like my life was over too. I couldn't imagine going on without you. You're all the family I have left." After the ambulance took you away, I prayed. I prayed harder than I ever have before. I prayed for a miracle. And then you came back and what? She took a drink from her coffee mug, stalling for time. Her hands were shaking. You know, I've been going to synagogue a lot lately, she said. Getting back in touch with my Judaism helped me through a lot of what I was dealing with. I've even been studying the Torah. Jordan raised his eyebrows. Are you trying to get me to go back to temple? No, just listen, she said. I prayed for a miracle and a miracle happened. I'm not egotistical enough to think it happened because of my prayer, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a miracle. You died and came back to life. That means something, biblically. She fixed him intently with her good eye, like he was supposed to understand. What are you trying to say? He said. She whispered the word, Moshiach. The Messiah? Jordan barked out a laugh. No, doll. If there is a Messiah, I seriously doubt it's going to be a gay environmental scientist from Albany. Besides, isn't it supposed to be that old guy with the big white beard in Brooklyn? Stop joking around, Dahlia said. God must have big plans for you if he brought you back from the dead. And many of the writings about Moshiach talk about him returning from death to ascend to his throne. But your friend Laura said I didn't come back from the dead. There was something called Lazarus syndrome, he protested. Lazarus isn't even from our testament. Dahlia's expression darkened. If you're not going to take this seriously. There's nothing to take seriously, he told her. I'm not the Messiah. I'm just me, your brother, the same old Jordan. But was he? He couldn't deny he was different from before. The hunger. Even thinking about it now, just acknowledging the hunger's existence, got his stomach growling. Dahlia's scent made his mouth water. He needed to get away from her. He stood up and walked to the living room, where he looked pensively out the window as he sipped from his mug. The taste of the coffee did nothing for him. The hunger demanded something more substantial. Dahlia drove her wheelchair up beside him. I'm sorry if I upset you. She put her hand on his arm. The smell of meat was overpowering. Something inside him roused itself, like a tsunami pushing against the far side of a dam, trying to break through. He wiped his mouth, practically drooling. He quickly took another swig of coffee, but it didn't offer the distraction he wanted. It tasted weak and unsatisfying. Not nearly as good as meat would taste. Fresh meat. He moved away from Dahlia again, pretending he had to put his mug down on the coffee table. She followed him. You don't have to believe, but I know God has something special planned for you. He must. The scent was overwhelming, like a steak sizzling on the grill in front of a starving man. Inside him, the dam splintered and cracked, the unseen force too powerful to be held back. I'm not trying to pressure you into coming with me to synagogue, though I'd love that, she said. Just think about what God might want from you, why he brought you back. He bent down toward her. She lifted her arms to accept his hug in return, the sleeves of her t-shirt pulling back to reveal the fatty meat of her upper arm. The scent of her broke the dam wide open. His lips pulled back from his teeth. Jordan bit into her arm. Thank you, good night.
Put your glasses on. Don't sit on them.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
I think there's a little bit of really get the zombie schmears. Wow.
Well, you know, he's back from the dead and has a hunger for meat. But he's not a zombie, because this is a realistic science book.
So I'd love to open this up to questions from the audience. Anybody? Yes, Teal.
You talked about how it wasn't originally a series, and then we said, make it a series. What adjustment did you have to make in your head to decide that you wanted to take it from a story that ended to a story that could go on with the characters and the world?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so the question was, what adjustments did I have to make in my head to take it from a standalone book to a series? And that's an excellent question, because it's not something that I've consciously thought about. But I think when you take something from a standalone story and make it a longer story, you have to really give thought to personal relationships, how the characters will grow, how the characters will change. She's actually really good friends with the police chief in the first book, but he winds up dying. So now I have to come up with a new police chief, right? But I can't just have it be the same relationship. So she actually starts off with a bit of a headbutting relationship with that chief at the beginning of the second book, partially because she was such good friends with the first chief that there's a part of her that's just not ready to work with somebody else. So it was mostly that kind of stuff. And also, I liked the idea of a series. You know, I wrote a series years ago of urban fantasies for St. Martin's, and it never got the third book. It was canceled before the third book came out. So this was my chance to be like, let's see if I can reach book 3, and I did. So that felt good. Yeah.
Go for 4. Go for 4.
Some of us are still waiting for the third in that other series.
Yes, I know.
Hi, Nick. Long-time reader, first-time caller.
Hey.
So I got 2 questions for you, really.
Is one of them more of a comment?
One of them's more of a comment. I'll start with Dude.
Yeah.
What do you have against Dahlia Mintz? She survived the first book.
She survived the first book, but not this one.
You brought her back just for this.
I did. Well, you know what it is. I wanted there to be a strong connection between the books because it takes place in the same town with a lot of the same people. So the things that happened in the first book have repercussions in the second and third book, including poor Dahlia Mintz, who's now in a wheelchair and missing an eye.
And now a lot more.
And yeah, no spoilers, but she's dead.
Okay, so in all seriousness, I will say I've read all 3 of these books, and I think they're all great. The Mind Worms is a quantum leap.
Oh, wow.
This book
Thank you.
was so scary and so touching.
Oh.
And the things that happen in this book are very gross, but the story is just compelling. I read this all in one sprint.
What? Wow.
And, yeah, before it was technically released. And so now I'm left with my final question, which is, how long before we get the obvious spin-off series of Meredith and Rebecca teen science sleuths?
Yes. So those are the adopted children of Laura and Booker. They are orphans from the second book that they have adopted and are now part of a family with in the third book.
Sounds like a young YA series to launch.
Yeah, well, see, how gross can you get in YA?
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, but they're actually some of my favorite characters too. You know, they were raised in this very isolated religious community, also in a fictional town. And they're pretty much the only survivors of that community, and they're orphans. And so one of them is still very much a rule follower, and the other one is really pushing the boundaries of what she can get away with now that she's living in a secular world. And it was super fun to write. Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Who else has a question?
This one.
Oh. Here we go. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. We'll get to you in a minute.
Hearing this excerpt made me think of the beginning of The Hungry Earth, which is also from the point of view of a character who is like, you know, in the thrall of something that has invaded their brain.
Yes.
And so I was just really curious if you could talk about that use of the first third person point of view to depict those mental states and what it was like to write those.
Thank you. Yeah. One of my deepest fears I discovered through the course of my writing, because it's something that keeps coming up, is loss of control of one's own body. And so that comes up a lot in a lot of the things I've written. And this is something I only realized looking back over like X amount of novels and stories. So there's something about that really gets to me, you know. So I think part of the way of dealing with fear is to sort of explore it from a safe distance, right? That's why we watch horror movies. That's why we read horror books, all this stuff. So for me, exploring that from a safe distance was writing it. What would it feel like to go through this? And through that process, I wouldn't say that I really exorcised the fear or anything, but it sort of brought me a greater understanding of what that might be like to, because there are real diseases where you lose control of your body, you know, and it terrifies me. But writing about it, I think, just sort of helped me, I don't know, be less scared. Not really. I'm still scared of it, but I sort of understand it.
It terrifies us too.
Yeah. But the thing about these books is that the human body in these books are infiltrated and taken over by actual real things in nature. Actual real things. So that's scary to me too. And hopefully to the reader.
Hi, Dr. Laura Powell, medical examiner, is a woman. How would this character have been different were it a man, or did you specifically want to say something with her being a woman in this kind of job?
I'm not sure I was conscious of wanting to say something particularly about her, but she does sort of butt up against. I mean, she works very closely with the police, and the police still tends to be very male-dominated as a career. So there's some headbutting that goes on there. But I'm not sure it was a conscious choice so much. It's just, well, this is what would happen if to have a female character. But humorously, my agent. So when we were talking about the second book, he was like, "Put Dr. Laura in it again. Give her a new boyfriend." And I said, "But I worked so hard on having her. Rekindle this relationship with Booker in the first book." And he's like, "She should have a different boyfriend in every novel." And I was like, "You mean like a James Bond kind of thing?" He's like, "Yeah." So I just thought that was really interesting because if it was a male character, I would not feel so strange about that. Like, okay, so yeah, I guess different love interests in every story is not that unheard of. But to do it with a female character, I felt like that's strange, and I don't know. So it didn't feel right anyway because I wanted to explore her relationship with Booker further. But I just thought it was interesting that he said that.
That's great.
Who else?
I hope my agent isn't watching this.
And Ned, congratulations on a new book.
Thank you.
Having read the first two in the series, and you talked about creating a new genre of this, I'm curious about all the research you did, and you probably came across a bunch of different things in nature that are like, oh my God, this is really freaking scary.
Yes.
And so how did you what's that process been going from traditional horror, which is evil, demon, mystics, zombies, all that kind of stuff, into just pure nature, science? What was that process like for you and exciting?
I owe it all to this book that my agent said I should read called Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, which is the greatest name of any author. Because it was such an interesting story about what fungi are like, and posits this idea of fungal intelligence and how we should start measuring intelligence differently from the way we do now. We tend to measure intelligence according to us. Well, we're intelligent species, right? We think, we reason, we imagine. But maybe that's not all there is to the definition of intelligence. There are certain actions that fungi take that make people think maybe there is an intelligence to this weird organism that has no brain or nervous system. So how does that even work? So that just lit up all kinds of parts of my brain for the imagination. And then now when I have free time, I just Google weird science stuff. And there's one thing that there's one thing I want to use, but I haven't figured out how yet. And this is the Portuguese man of war, which is so much more than just a jellyfish. It's also, if you've ever met somebody who's had an experience getting stung by a Portuguese man of war, they will tell you it frickin' hurts. But the cool thing about the man of war is it's not a single organism. It's something like 3 or 5 separate organisms working together to create something that's more than the sum of their parts. Like these organisms become the stomach, and these organisms become the limbs, and these organisms do this or that, or these organisms become the lungs or whatever. I'm fascinated by that. And I love this whole idea of like sort of Voltroning together, like some kind of organism. So I'd love to use that in the book, and I haven't figured out yet. I haven't found the way into that one yet.
The opportunity will arise. Has to. Anybody else has a question? Yes.
So many good questions tonight.
Really good question.
I should have prepared. Now you gotta have a good one.
One of the things about the books is that I find interesting is you use a lot of familial relationships, small town, everybody knows each other. and I find them to ring really, really true.
Oh, wow.
That's what I really, really like about them. Can you talk a little bit about, does that come naturally to your books, or did you want that intimacy for this kind of horror?
I wanted it specifically for this kind of horror because it was important, especially for the first book, that Laura knows everyone in town. So it couldn't be like it happens in Brooklyn, because in Brooklyn you may not even know the person who lives upstairs from you. But she has to know everybody in town so that when the change starts to come over them, she can recognize it immediately. But I'm a city boy myself. Like I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, but I was shy. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was a homebody. So I didn't really absorb what it's like to live in a small town where everyone knows each other, because I just went to my swim classes at the Y and then just, to school or whatever. But I think there's something kind of universal about it that I was able to draw upon, which is just sort of like, when you know people, there's immediate connection, right? If you don't like them, the connection is a negative one. But if you do like them, it's a positive one. And so it was just a matter of imagining that connection. And I count myself lucky that I have a lot of friends, like you, Morgan. And so I was able to draw upon that sort of emotional state of like knowing people and being concerned about them. I'm very concerned about you, Morgan.
You realize by the third book, she's the Jessica Fletcher of weird shit. You realize that she did it.
Right. She's the one bringing it all together. That's a popular theory about Jessica Fletcher.
Anybody else? Question for the author?
Okay, other authors know I ask this a lot in virtual readings too, but do you listen to music when you write, or is silence golden?
I usually listen to music when I write. So there's this really sort of niche musical genre called dark synthwave.
Oh, yes! It's good.
Because it doesn't have lyrics, it's very easy to write to. And sometimes it's just sort of a droning noise. Well, not noise, it's a droning tone. And so that can help me sort of just stay focused and not think about, oh, there's a note change here, or there's, lyrics to pay attention to. So yes, I do, yes.
Can I just add on to that? Dark synth, it sounds like what you hear when you're in the Sleep No More. That it's so good. It's so good.
So much of it is actually inspired by the soundtracks that John Carpenter made to his movies. John Carpenter would just, get a synth or a piano or something and start noodling, and he'd come up with these classic soundtracks. So a lot of that was very influential on dark synthwave. Yeah, so
Any other questions from the audience?
Kind of pursuing the concept of that she's the small town examiner who's now, by the third book, encountered a third strange experience. Looking forward, would the fact that she's done this now draw her outside of that, make her the fish out of water when some weird thing happens somewhere else? And that kind of, enlarges the world. So
Yeah.
it's not like, this town is the epicenter of every weird disease on the planet, and it's caused by the Zec Corporation.
I hear you on that. I thought about what it would be like to bring Laura to New York. Maybe she and Booker are visiting friends and something happens somewhere in New York. So yeah, it definitely could do that. But she's also starting by the end of the third book to realize there's more to the world, and there's this feeling of like an invisible world pressing down on ours that these things are coming from. But I'm keeping it scientific.
Thank you. I think we have a question back here. My microphone's not going to reach. Could you? Thank you.
Hello, friend.
Hi. My question is, do you think that, because you were talking about intelligence, do you think sometimes intelligence is rated by the need for survival?
I think intelligence comes from the need for survival. I think it's an evolutionary thing. If we had never figured out how to make fire, for instance, we certainly wouldn't have come this far, right? So, but I think there's survival intelligence like that. Like, oh, we need to make fire. We need to make shelter. We need to figure out how to get food. Oh, animals are tasty, that kind of thing.
And relatives.
But I think there's also a different kind of intelligence of like figuring things out. Right. So one of the cool things that I learned about fungi and fungal intelligence was that fungi is basically a series of filaments under the ground. Like the mushrooms you see are just the fruiting bodies. So basically the genitalia of the mushrooms, of the fungi. But they will hook up with the roots of trees, and they'll start to do sort of a nutrient exchange with the trees. Here's a little bit of something for you, and you give me a little bit of something. But, this is real, sometimes another tree will be like, I'll give you more. And it will unhook from one tree and hook onto another. So I believe that is also part of survival, but there's something more to it too. There's just something really fascinating about this idea of fungal intelligence. And if fungi has intelligence, who's to say a wasp doesn't have intelligence of some kind, a snake doesn't have intelligence of some kind, a cat.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
Any questions about cats?
Questions? I will say, Nick, you are a fun guy.
What a bum.
So you will be signing copies of your books.
Happy to sign copies, happy to take photos of people. We're selling copies too. We take all kinds of money transfer programs. We're living in the future, folks.
Excellent, excellent. And where can people find you if they want to know more about you?
NicholasKaufmann.com. Make sure to remember that there's 2 N's at the end of Kaufmann. If you go to NicholasKaufmann.com with 1 N, I don't know what you're going to find.
And last question: are you working on it? Do you have anything in the hopper right now?
I'm focused so much on the podcast with Dave right now that every other book idea is just sort of hovering around in the back of my head.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's a gorgeous night.
You
brought the beautiful weather. We all want to thank you for that. You get full credit for that. And thank all of you guys for sharing your great stories and your awesome questions.
Thank you.
Great energy. It's super fun. Stick around, have a drink, chat with Nick. And thank you so much.
Ask me more questions about bugs and stuff.